we just learned how to download the data from one PDF table online. So this time we want to extract all the 7 tables from the same PDF file from the web. So before that, let me go grab the template that we worked last time. So just go to Global GitHub, get inside and go to repositories, -beginner, and then simply go to this PDF plumber example result 1.py. And when you click raw, you'll get this. Simply right click, save as, and here I'm going to save it to my USB drive, the app folder, and I just called it PDF plumber, and I just put today's date, 2022, December 5th. Okay. Oops, you know what? I forgot to save that as Python. So when I go to app and I have that PDF plumber, when I click it, it is a text file. So it doesn't matter because we can just Ctrl+Shift+S and then save it to all type, all files, and then just put in .py extension after that. Save it. Then I should have a PDF plumber 2022 December 5th Python file, and just get rid of this. Ctrl+Shift+I to open up the Python idle, and Ctrl+O navigate to this one. Okay, the Python file. All right, let me just put a comment in front of this one. So basically, this is what we did last time, right? So if you don't know how to get a single table, just go over the last video and you'll know why. Since we don't want to repeat these codes 7 times for all the 7 tables, we will create a class called allTab to manage the tables that we are going to get. Actually, we can just get rid of these. Okay, so this time, we are going to create a class called allTab. It just means all tables, okay? And we have to initiate this class with the init function, which has 2 basic attributes, the URL and the page index. If you take a look at the PDF file, we have 2 pages. This is page 1, and this is page 2. All our data are on page 2, right? But if you scrape the other PDF table online, you might have different structures. That's why we do it in the class, so that we can change the value of the URL and the page index so that we can cope with different cases when we scrape, okay? So the first one is self.url. Usually you will see this self. Basically, it's just a node that connects all the variables to the instance of the class. Okay, so the URL here, which is this one, gets assigned to this instance variable self.url. And this one, page_index equals page_index. These codes here are just telling the class that we can retrieve a certain page within the PDF file on the specified URL here, or whatever URL that you're going to scrape, okay? Then we are going to create a method within the allTab class, getAll, to get all the tables from the specified URL. Okay, so we just get all the tables. It's just like what you did with all these codes that we done last time. All right, so basically we have the req equals request to get the URL, right? But this time, since we are using the class method, we have to use the self. We just simply add the self in front. And this one, instead of referring to the URL, we use the self.url, which is this one you see, okay? And we have the source byte, which is the bytes IO, and then self.req.content, right? We have to define a PDF, self.pdf instance. We use the PDF plumber to open up self.byte, all right? It's just this one. And then we have the self.page equals to self.pdf.pages. It is a range, right? But this range is referring to the self.page index, right? Self.page index can be 1, 0, 2, whatever. But in this case, since we only have 2 pages, so the index can only be 0 or 1, okay? That's the page. And we want to grab all the tables from this page. We specify the tables equals self.page.extract tables. So basically, it's just extracting all the 7 tables from the page that you specify, okay? And then return self.tables. All right, actually, we can just get rid of all these just to make it nicer. Let's say if we want to use this class to get all the tables, we have to create an instance. I just called it int instance tables because we want to get all the tables, right? So let's see what we get. It gets assigned to the allTab class. The all tab class has two parameters to fill in. The URL equals whatever, and the page index equals whatever, right? The URL is the target URL, which is this one you see. You can fill in whatever URL here. That's why we create a class. Since our PDF has only 2 pages, so we can only be 0 or 1, right? But we know that our tables are on page 2, so we have the index equals 1. But it's not over yet. We need to use the get all method to grab all the tables, okay? So let me print int tables. You should expect a long chunk of list. Press F5, print it out. It should be a really long one. Oops, typo here. Sorry about that. Typo again. Sorry about that. It should be self.src_byte. Okay, it happens. Right? How come? Because this one I have forgot the self. So I think that should be fine. Okay, so you see this big chunk of thing? That means this method works. Now we are going to create a method called getITable to get into each table of the PDF. Again, we have a self, and then we have the tab index because we have to specify which table on the PDF that we are going to retrieve. For each table, we have the column head. I just give it column index, and the row index. I just call that row IDX. So basically, we can just create an instance variable self.table equals to the class all tab, and then we just use the get all method to grab all the tables, right? Then inside the square bracket, we can use the tab index. And then for each table, we have the column heads. I just call it col heads, and it's equal to the instance self.table. Inside square bracket, we put in the key that points to the item that the column heads appear. For example, in the last video, the column heads appear on the second item, which has the index 1. Here, we are not going to hard code the index. Instead, we just put the column index here so that when we change, let's say if we change it to 1, it's the second item of each table. Or if we change it to 0, it is the first one. Okay, so that's it for the column heads. For the data, self.row data, we just call it row data. It's equal to this one, the self.table again, but instead of the column index, we put in the row index. Actually, this is the starting index. Usually, it's followed by a colon and then the end index. But now we want to get all the data. That's why we just skip the end index. Okay? Once we know the column heads and the data, we can create a data frame. A data frame is just a table-like thing in the pandas library. So we just call it df, and it's equal to pd, which is the pandas library, dot data frame. And inside that, we need to fill in the data and the columns. And the data is simply the instance of the row data that we defined above. And the columns are the column heads. So we just put in self.colHeads. Then we're going to return that self.df instance. Before we print it out, I'll change the instance tables variable a little bit. Here, I just include the link, which is the target URL, and the page index, because we know it is page 2. That means we have the page index 1. If we just print tables, okay, it will just give you a memory address because we didn't do anything on it. See here. And if we give it a method, .getAll, F5, it will show the big chunk of list. And let's say if you put in a square bracket of 0, F5, it will give you a list of the first table. Okay, so basically we have 0, 1, all the way to 6 because we have 7 tables, right? Now, let's say if I want to access table 2, so I create a variable table 2 is equal to the instance tables variable, which is this one, which contains the PDF data on page 2 of this link, right? Actually, we can simply use the method getITable, and then we specify the text index, the column index, and the row index, right? And the table index simply points to one of the 7 tables. Since we are getting the second table, the index is 1, and inside that table, the column heads appear on the second item, just like this one, account description and field code. So for the second item, the index is also 1. And where does the data start? It starts from the third item, like this one. This is the first table, but you can see the pattern. Okay, so it's starting from the third item. So the index is 2. So when I print out table 2, F5, I should see this, right? So this is the column head, and these are the data. the accounts, and the field code. Now we don't want just table 2. We will have the all tables, and it's in the, let's say, each table for individual table. So basically here we just store all the tables in a variable I. Okay, so you just pretend that I, okay, in the range of the length of all tables, right? So how can we get all tables? Okay, let me just call it get all tables to represent everything, okay? So it's just all tab dot get all, right? And that's the get all tables here. So basically what's inside this range is the table 0, table 1, table 2, table 3, all the way to table 6. So in total, we have 7 tables, right? And I is the number of the table. So it starts from 0, 1, 2, all the way to 6. In total, you have 7, okay? So for each table, what we can do is the instant tables, this one, dot get I table, and then we just sub in these parameters. So basically, I'm just putting in all these, right? Instead of putting a fixed number for the tab index, I put I, the variable I, this one, that is corresponding to this I. That means for table 0, I get individual table 0, right? When I equals 1, I do this same thing to get the table. For this for loop, 0, 1, all the way to 6. The all tables thing is a list. So I'm not trying to print the list here because it is a really long list, because it is this thing in the long form of this table. So what we are going to do is create a variable called result to store the result. So it's going to be equal to the pandas.concat. So inside the concat function, we put in this list, all tables. And I can print result. Okay, maybe I just close this and I press F5. And I should get, oops, I found the problem. Because this one, I just used the all tab class without defining anything. Instead, I should use this one, the instance tables, int tables, because it has the target URL and the page index defined. Okay, let's press F5. And I should have a really long table. Yep, this is a really long table. And I should have, like you see, all these accounts. And if you take a look at the column left-hand side, like this one, the end of the first table, it has index 9, and the start of the second table with the index 0. Basically what we can do, let me just close that. If we add ignore index equals true, F5, okay. Then we will have a table with the index in numerical sequence from 0 all the way to 55. Why we want to ignore index? Because when you export this long table to CSV, it's a good practice to have the index number in numerical sequence. We don't need to print this table in the console. We can simply result dot to CSV and then put in whatever location that you want to export to. So I just called it export location, and it's equal to, I just put it in my G drive, my USB, and I just called it new underscore CSV dot CSV. Okay. And inside that to CSV, I just put the export location and see if I can get this big chunk of table in CSV. F5, go to drive and see if I get the file new CSV. Yep, here, new CSV. So this is new CSV. And let me open up F. Okay, so this is page 1 of the PDF, right? And this is page 2. Let's see if we have the data correct. So this is the cash deposits. Here, field code 1000. Let's look for the last one. Here, total assets. Here, total assets. And the code 2599. Right? So basically, we are just getting all the accounts from this PDF. Okay? Hopefully, you can learn this skill and apply it to your case. It will be very useful. Okay? Thank you. Bye.